Well, today on the Boiling Point, we're going to be talking about beading, welding, and rolling a boiler tube. Welcome to the Boiling Point. We're with Steve Taylor, Director of the Rental Division, and we're going to be talking a little bit today about beading, rolling, welding a tube. Now, Steven's not a novice at this. He's in the rental division, but he actually worked a lot of time out here in the shop doing this
a long time.
So, got a few years anyway. Steven's been with us about 35 years, so a lot of knowledge here. Well, let's talk a little bit about the beading and rolling. And first, let's just talk about rolling. You know, why are we actually rolling a tube?
Well, a lot of people think that the weld that's on there actually seals the tube. It doesn't. It has a different process, what it's there for, and we'll talk about that. The sealing of the tube in the tube sheet is done by rolling in it. So you're just, more or less, you're pressing that tube out against the tube sheet really, really hard with a roll, and that's the entire process that seals that tube to the tube sheet. The rest of this is superfluous. It doesn't do anything to seal the tube.
Okay, so the beading, what is that for?
The beading, you know, if you leave that tube sticking out like this, at least on the hot pass, which is the very first pass where the hot gas of the fire comes down through here. By the time it gets back here, it's 2,000 degrees, hits the rear door, or if it's a water back boiler, the water back, and turns and goes back. So we're talking 1900 degrees here. If you leave it sticking out like this, that's going to overheat and start to crack. When it starts to crack, it's going to continue to go in until it cracks inside. Then you're going to have a leak in that tube. You can't have that. Okay. So all this does, we're trying to transfer that heat. We want to get the heat off the end of that tube, transferred to that tube sheet. And one of the ways to do that is to bead that tube, turn that over, seal that against the tube sheet, and that transfers the heat straight to the tube sheet, protects the end of that tube. That's all it's for.
Okay. Sometimes you see welding on one side and then beading on the other.
Right. Typically, the welding is on the hottest pass, the very end of the boiler, the first pass where it starts back through from the Morrison tube back around. And we like to weld the hot pass. A lot of the manufacturers do, and we follow their procedures. It does a better job. If you're 1900 degrees here, over time, you will have some of those tubes will start to leak. They'll just overheat.
Okay.
But if you weld that and seal weld that, it just gives you a better seal from the end of that tube to the tube sheet. And all we're doing is trying to transfer that heat. That's what that's there for.
Okay. Well, we thought it would be kind of a good idea to really go through each one of these processes from rolling to beading and the welding, and really how we do that. Steven's going to walk through. We're going to have our man Jimmy come in, and he's actually going to do that. All right, well, we got my man Jimmy Kurtzinger that's going to be doing the hard labor for us here, and he's going to get started. Steven, why don't you walk through the process as he starts this, the rolling process, on what he's actually doing.
Okay, what he's going to do here is do a straight roll on this tube. These tubes we're going to seal weld like this one is. So you're going to do a straight roll. Jimmy, go ahead and show us what you're going to do. So he'll oil it first, get some oil in there, some lubrication so those rolls don't lock up inside that tube. Slide the tube in there. This pin is tapered all the way in, so the further that pin goes in, the more it pushes those rolls out against that tube. You hear that roll bogging down, that motor bogging down? That's that roll really tightening up against that tube and press it out. And that's pretty much it. He's done the roll. What would happen now is he would seal weld that, and then he would come back and roll it again, and that tube's done. That's how quick it happens.
Now, Steven, can you actually roll that too much?
Yeah, you can. If you roll it too much, you'll thin that tube out, and you'll keep somebody further down the road if that tube was to leak. They scaled the boiler up. Something happened and they overheated it and caused it to start leaking. They shocked the boiler, pulled that tube a little bit loose from that tube sheet, and they had to re-roll it. If you roll it too much, then they can't re-roll it. They have to cut the tube out and put a new tube in there.
Well, I know, and sometimes we sell a new boiler and they'll actually show up on the job site and they're actually leaking. You'll bring the roll out. Is that typically what happens?
That's typically what happens. Well, a lot of times in transit, they'll get shook up and they'll loosen up, but it's real common for a brand new boiler to have tubes leaking in it. Until they heat it up and fire it the first time, everything swells up, all the tubes stretch, get all that process going through, then you may have some tubes leak a little bit. You come in and tighten them up just a little bit, just to snug them, you're good to go.
Okay. Okay, so the tube has been rolled, and so now we're just going to go ahead and weld. Jimmy, why don't you go ahead and start that and get out of the way.
So now he's going to take a pencil grinder, clean the inside of the tube so that when he re-rolls, he doesn't get any of that splatter in the rolls themselves. So now he's going to re-roll that tube to tighten it up after welding it. This time he'll use a Collins roll, just a different style roll that doesn't flare, doesn't do anything to it, just a straight roll. Go ahead, Jimmy.
Okay, so now we're going to do a new process. It's called beading, and we're going to actually flare the tube first, right?
Yep.
And then he's going to come back and he's actually going to do the bead, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So he's using a completely different type of roll. It has rollers on it that are at an angle, and that's going to put the flare to the end of that tube. So we'll do the same process. You see that roll is a combination roll. It rolls the tube into the tube sheet and it flares the end of it at the same time, preparing it so we can bead it like this one is. So now we're going to move on to actually beading the end of that tube. This tool is a special tool they use, and they'll form these themselves to get the right curvature, exactly what they want to use. Use a little air hammer to do it with, and it's a technique that requires a lot of skill. It took me a long time to learn how to do it, and it requires a lot of arm strength that I don't have anymore. So go ahead, Jimmy, show us how this is done. You saw there that towards the end, Jimmy was going around pretty fast with it. That's how you get that smooth surface to it. If you didn't do that, if you went real slow with it, you'd have jags in there and it would look like, it doesn't hurt it, it just looks awful. So Jimmy's done a good job. He's done that a lot of times, so you can tell by the way he put that in there. So it's perfect beaded tube. So he's beaded that tube. The last thing in this process is to touch that up. When you bead that tube, there's a chance you could loosen that tube up a little bit. So he'll go in with that Collins roll, that straight roll, touch it up just like we did on the other end when we welded it, and that'll be the end of that tube. It'll be sealed up.
All right, well, thanks, Jimmy. Thanks, Steven, for coming out here. It's always good to have one of these jigs. These guys actually practice this all the time, and really just appreciate you taking the time to show everybody this, beading, rolling, and welding. And we'll see you next time on The Boiling Point. Well, I appreciate Jimmy and Steven stopping by and talking a little bit about beading and welding and rolling of a boiler tube. It's amazing the skill of a Boilermaker and just how long it takes for them to get their craft. Make sure you like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and share the videos if you like them. If you don't mind, subscribe. We'll see you next time on The Boiling Point.